Hey, everybody, it's showtime here. It's time for another virtual book club, and I'm very excited to present the latest and greatest. Well, it's really not the latest and greatest. It's the latest book club we're going to do. It's Amaze every customer every time. We have some folks that are starting to show up, and as they come in, we'll wait just a moment or two. So this will be outstanding. We're going to do a virtual book club on Amaze every customer every time. So we have gone through all 7 books. We started with the first book, which was The Convenience Revolution. And The Convenience Revolution, we actually did that through a Zoom platform. That was our first virtual book club. And then we opened it up to others on this new platform, StreamYard. So the last 5 weeks, we've done it on this. Now, I've written 7 books. One was re-released just recently. We talked about that last week. That was The Cult of the Customer. The one book that I'm not going to do a virtual book club on is the Loyal Customer. Let me pull it out. There it is. Just a thin little book. And actually, I jokingly say this is not a book. It's a lesson. And it's a very short book, if you will, with big letters and big writing. And let me tell you what this book is about. And it's basically my cab driver story. Cab driver story where I talk about Frank, the cab driver from Dallas, Texas. Frank is an amazing gentleman. And he picked me up and he took me to the airport, and it was just a great experience. And every time I'd go back to Dallas, Frank would pick me up and take me again and again. And it was just until he retired that I stopped using him. So it's a great story. If you go to my YouTube channel, which is shep.tv, shep.tv, there it is right there in the banner, YouTube, shep.tv, look for the cab driver story. And look for there's 2 versions. There's a version that's a little bit older, still look the same, didn't have hair, but is a little bit older. And I like that version better. They're both exactly the same as far as the information and the story goes, but I just thought the other one, that older one is better. It's like vintage Shep. And what's cool about that is it's a great video that showcases how an ordinary, mundane ride can turn into something exceptional. And speaking of Dallas, Texas, Robert, how are you? I'm Robert McDowell, excuse me, is from Dallas. Hey, there he is. Look at that family. And we always joke about the Dallas Stars and the St. Louis Blues. And so I'm talking a little bit about my Frank, the cab driver story from Dallas, Texas. And anyway, show it. Your people enjoy watching it, and then afterwards kind of debrief and say, hey, what is it about this story that made this service exceptional? Hello, Nita. Thank you. Yep, she's seen it. A great story. She wants to be a cab driver she wants a cab driver with cold beverages. You know what? And more, our Uber drivers are figuring out if they want to get bigger tips, give them a little bit of a piece of candy, a bottle of water, or whatever. So, all right, well, let's get started. We're about 2 or 3 minutes into the hour, and I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So we're going to talk today about the Amaze Every Customer Every Time book. I love this book. This book is loaded with content, specifically 52 tools to create an amazing experience. Now, I don't know if you can see on the slide, but Amaze Every Customer Every Time, underneath it, there's a toolbox. And the toolbox has a tiny little logo on the toolbox that says Ace Hardware. Now, some of you may be thinking, how did I get permission from Ace Hardware to put their toolbox on the cover of my book? Well, let me give you the background on the book. But before we do that, I always love to remind everybody, as I do in almost every speech, is that, hey, if you want to be amazing, better than average all of the time. Hey, Jason, all the way from Australia. Thanks for being here. Love Jason. Jason's with Volkswagen. He and I have literally traveled the globe together, and I've had the honor of doing a number of Volkswagen presentations. And so I hope you're doing well over there. And boy, there we have Tatsuya. And I don't know where you're from, but I'm assuming you're from pretty far away with a name like that. And if you're not, hey, you're almost a neighbor. But how do you be amazing? Better than average all the time. Not much better than average, sometimes just 10% better than average. But when it's consistent and predictable, that's the key. All right, let me get into the story behind the book so that we can get into this. The story behind the book is the case for Ace. Ace Hardware is an amazing company. They have about 4,700 locations in over 70 countries. They're a world-recognized brand. Almost everywhere I go, people have heard of Ace Hardware. Everybody knows Ace Hardware. And hey, I see my friend Buddy Rice, who's not only just a great friend, he's one of our colleagues here at Shepherd Presentations. He is our star trainer, and all the way from Mobile, Alabama. There's a picture of him. If you can see, the right behind him are the Great Pyramids, because just recently we did a program in Cairo for one of our clients, and that's one of the benefits of traveling around the world. So, and hey, there's Patrick from Fresno. All right, let's get into this because more and more people are coming. The story behind Ace. So I was looking for a company to write about. And this is not a book about Ace Hardware, although Ace Hardware is featured as the role model throughout the entire book with many, many examples. And I mentioned earlier in this presentation that this is chock full of ideas and tactics, 52 specific tools. So if you look at the other books that I've written, last week we did Cult of the Customer. There's dozens of companies represented in that book. The week before that, we did The Amazement Revolution. There's 36 companies represented. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be interesting to have one company represented throughout the entire book as the main case study rather than try to get dozens of companies? So I looked for a company that was a rock star in customer service that hadn't been written about, but everybody would know. And that wasn't easy. So there was an article that came out in Business Week that recognized the 25 top brands in the world in customer service and experience. And number 10 was Ace Hardware. And I go, wow, that's fascinating. And number 11, by the way, was the Ritz-Carlton. In other words, Ace beat out one of my other favorite companies, the Ritz-Carlton. And by the way, this Business Week survey was looking at online reviews, was looking at awards that the different companies have won and how they're recognized within their industry. They also looked, I believe, at the American Customer Satisfaction Index, which rates companies. So Ace definitely was under consideration. And here's the coolest part. All of this was happening when I was in San Diego doing a speech for Ace Hardware. And I had the CEO, chairman of the board, the VPs of sales, merchandising, all sitting around the lunch table when we started talking about my next book needs to feature a company. And we decided that day it was going to be Ace Hardware. So I had the chance to go up to Chicago, where the world headquarters are, and interview dozens of the executives. And I interviewed about 75 store owners, dealers, to get ideas that they're using to compete. So here's the idea behind the book. It's all about customer service and experience, and it's all about separating yourself from the competition. And that's what Ace has had to do. They're independently owned stores. So some of them are pretty big from the standpoint of an owner may own 8, 10, 12 stores. There's one particular chain of Ace Hardware stores, Westlake, which was 100 and some odd stores. So that's a huge, huge, huge company. But many of the stores are just single stores owned by a mom and pop type situation, a family. So they compete against the big box stores. They compete against other hardware stores just down the street. They're basically almost every type of business that we can think of. They sell, by the way, to consumers. They also sell to businesses. So they're B2B as well. And I know Jason, my friend from Australia and Volkswagen, this is a great analogy because many of the dealers at Ace Hardware are similar to the dealers in the car industry. So that's the story behind Ace. That's why I chose them as a role model. So I'm going to take you through the 5 major areas of the book. And by the way, something I want to say is I talked to the leadership of Ace Hardware, John Van Huysen, who is their CEO. Wonderful guy. What he says about Ace is what many, many companies feel. Unless you're a huge company that competes against other huge companies, many times you might feel like you're in a David versus Goliath situation. And if you remember the story of David versus Goliath, David was small, Goliath was big. And if you remember the end of the story, David wins. And that's why a company like Ace, even though they're worldwide, they're often owned by mom and pops that have small businesses competing against a big box store that moves in across the street, a Home Depot, a Lowe's, a Walmart, a Sam's Club that sells, home improvement type inventory. Anyway, leadership. There's 5 areas. The first we're going to talk about is leadership. There were a number of tactics behind this, and the first, what I'm going to do is in each category, I'm going to give you 2 of the different stories or tactics that we have. Number 1 is act like you own the place. And what I mean by this is that everybody gets to act like a leader. So this is one of the very few examples that I had in the book that didn't relate to ACE. There was a gentleman named Clark. He worked at a pizza restaurant. And Clark, one day, one of the guests asked him, "Are you the owner?" And Clark said, "Why would you ask me that?" And the guest said, "Well, you just seem to be working so hard to take care of us. We thought you must be the owner." And at that moment, Clark realized, I want to be so good that every guest thinks that I'm the owner of this restaurant. And that's how good he wanted to be. And that's that leadership mentality. You can act like an owner. You can act like you own the place. You can act like the boss, even if you're not the boss, with the idea being you're doing such a great job that people say, wow, this must be the person in charge. By the way, 2 things were happening. Clark actually liked working for his boss, and that's important. If you are a leader, a manager, a supervisor, a CEO, if you're the boss, you want to be somebody that others would look up to and want to be like you. And number 2, that boss, the owner of the pizza restaurant, actually said to Clark, you need to go out there. You're a good person. Do what you think is right to take care of the customer, and then come back and tell me, and we'll make sure that you did the right thing, or we'll talk about how to tweak it for next time. So act like you own the place. Great idea. Another idea is to debrief misery and magic. Now, many of the Ace Hardware stores have daily meetings just before the store opens. And what they do is when they get an accolade from a customer, they share it with everybody and they talk about, this is what happened. This is a great compliment. So-and-so did a great job, or we did something great for one of our customers. And the cool thing is they talk about, is this something that we can do on a regular basis? Is this something different? So what happens is they debrief that positive moment of magic, that positive experience, and think, what can we do to make it part of our process, part of our system? By the way, just like whenever there's a complaint or a problem, we debrief the misery as well, which means if something bad happened, why did it happen? How did it happen? How can we avoid it from happening again? So you debrief both misery and magic. Unfortunately, most companies just debrief the misery. They miss the opportunity to debrief the magic, which is just simply having the opposite conversation. How did this happen? Well, that's the same question you ask about misery. How did that pause? And instead of what can we do to prevent it from happening again, what can we do to make sure it happens again and again and again? So there's other tactics in the leadership principles, but these were ideas that I pulled from some of the Ace Hardware retailers, and all of these are. Next, we talked about culture. One of my favorite ideas here is to be the best place to work, you have to be the best place to buy from. In other words, what's happening on the inside of Ace Hardware is going to be felt on the outside by the customer when they come in. If you've got a culture where people enjoy being there, where people feel like they're appreciated for what they do, they're going to turn around. And by the way, they call the employees at Ace associates typically. These associates are going to turn around and treat the customers better. So they really work on the internal experience that employee is having, or that associate is having. So to be the best place to work, to be the best place, and actually it says to be the best place to work, be the best place to buy. It's the same. You want to be both. I probably should have rephrased this and said to be the best place to buy from, you should also be the best place to work. All right. Number 2 is to tell the story. This is a great culture building tool. Telling the story is about communicating great experiences that employees and customers are having at your business. And the idea behind the story is some of these stories can become the go-to story as an example, the legends, if you will, as an example. And I'm going to break away from Ace to share a great legendary story, Zappos.com. So Zappos wanted to be recognized as one of the great service leaders in the online retail world. And Tony Hsieh, their CEO, said to his team of support people, and by the way, if you look on a Zappos website Any page, you will find the phone number because I want to make it easy for the customer to get in touch with the company if there's a question. And a pretty good percentage, maybe it's not quite 20%, but around 18%, at least a while back, 18% of the interactions or transactions that are made at Zappos involve some type of a phone call or connection to the company beyond just being on the website. Lots of questions. Since they primarily sell shoes, somebody may ask, does this shoe run large or small? Is it true to size? Those are simple questions. Many of them can be done in a chat, but it's easy to connect with them. Anyway, I digress. One of the things that Tony told his people was, hey, I don't care what they ask, help a customer with anything, even if it's unrelated. So one night he's in San Francisco, the headquarters of Zappos is in Las Vegas, and he is hungry for a pizza. So he tells his friend he's with, it's 2 a.m, and they're open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Maybe it's just crazy hours. Hey, call Zappos and find out where the closest pizza place that will deliver to us at this time of night is. And sure enough, this person called Zappos helpline and said, I know you don't sell pizzas, but you say the legend is you'll help us for just about anything. I'm looking for a place to order a pizza that's open right now. And sure enough, that customer service agent went on and typed in and found a location of a pizza restaurant that would deliver it at, middle of the night. So it's a great story. Those kinds of stories become legends. The Nordstrom story about somebody wanting to return a set of tires to a Nordstrom store. Many of you may be familiar with that. That's about a legend. So create your own legends. Tell the story. Let everybody know what the great experiences are. All right, number 3 is one-on-one. This is the idea that we're working one-on-one with the customer. What can we do to make that experience better? So the 2 examples I want to give you from the book is the first is 1 to say yes and 2 to say no. The idea is if I need to say no to a customer, I have to go ask permission. But if I think I can say yes, and it's the right thing to do, I don't have to ask permission. That doesn't mean I'm just allowed to do anything I want. No, if a company hires good people, trains them well, and tells them what they're supposed to do and shows them what to do, dictates common sense would start to take over. And what happens at that point is if a customer comes with an odd request, the store associate, the employee can think about it and say, you know what, it's not going to hurt the company. Seems like a reasonable request, not going to cost us any money. Why can't I do this for the customer? And that's what you do for the customer. And that's a simple variation of this. But ideally, you just take care of it and do it for the customer. Then you can go back to your manager, your boss, and say, hey, I did this. Was this okay to do? And by the way, the moment the manager says, that was great, yes, do that every time, that means you never have to ask again. And ideally, a manager at the next meeting with the group of employees or associates will then say, let me share with you an example of what somebody did. And nobody ever has to ask permission to do this. Just go do it. Now, if you think you have to say no to a customer, that's when you go back and you talk to your boss, your manager, and you say, is there a way around this? And you get help. So it's a great way to learn. The next point or tactic is that the customer is not always right. I love this one because so many people say the customer's always right, and they're not always right. Sometimes they're wrong. But here's the key. If they're going to be wrong, you let them be wrong with dignity and respect. The customer is not always right, but they are always the customer. So let them be wrong with dignity and respect. And if you find you're getting into a confrontation where the customer is definitely pushing you and maybe you're starting to feel provoked, keep this in mind. You're never trying to win an argument. You're always trying to win the customer. And if there comes to a point where the customer is being extremely unreasonable, that may be the time to take it to the next level. And if a customer is belligerent, if they're cussing at you, if they're doing things that would be just that aren't right, I think that's also a good time for a manager to step in. And this is what I love. Some customers aren't worth doing business with. And those are the ones that treat your people really, really badly. And I'm not saying that we can't turn this customer around. We can't help this customer understand that, hey, we're human, we're trying to work with you. But there's a point in time where a manager or a leader will terminate a relationship with a customer because of the way they treat the employees. And when that happens, everybody looks to that manager and basically it's an internal applause. Thank you. It's appreciation because it shows that these people that we work with care more about us as the employees than they do about the one sale this customer might be looking at. And I think it sends a powerful message. So one-on-one, that's number 3. Number 4, the competitive edge. This section talks about strategies and tactics that are very specific to giving you the edge. So I'm going to give you one that's more strategic and one that's very tactical. Own your mile. Now, this is a metaphorical mile, but at the Ace Hardware store, if you are the Ace Hardware in a particular area, you want everybody within a certain area. It might be a mile, it might be 3 miles, might be 5 miles to know who you are. If you're the only Ace Hardware store in a small community, you want to be the focal point when it comes to home improvement. You want to own that mile. So how do you do that? You get to know your customers. You make sure your store is stocked with everything that you would expect in an Ace Hardware store, plus items that are very specific to the area. And we'll talk a little bit more in just a moment about doing local well. That's in the next point I want to make in number 5. But that's part of owning your mile, is recognizing who your customers are. It means getting involved with the community, which we'll talk about more in just a few minutes. It means understanding who your customers are and getting to know your customers, what they want, what they need, and being able to talk to them, make suggestions. Own your mile. It means going when you go to church, getting to know the people socially, going out to community events. Perhaps you sponsor some of the community events, or you sponsor kids softball and baseball and soccer clubs, football clubs for the international folks. We call it soccer here, call it football elsewhere. So one of the cool ideas, and this is another piece of the book, but it ties into owning your mile. There was an Ace Hardware dealer down in Texas, and just across the street, Home Depot went up. And he was, gosh, Home Depot, this place is huge. It actually was more than 10 times the size of his store. And how am I going to compete with Home Depot? Not only that, when it came time to advertise, Home Depot outspent this Ace Hardware store advertising budget by, get this, 30 to 1. So for every dollar Ace Hardware was putting out there, Home Depot is putting $30 out there, 30 times more in an advertising spend. Boy, think of all the extra radio commercials and advertisements in the papers and TV and social media and the effort to, create coupons and bring people in. Think about it. Wow, how do you compete against that? And this very smart Ace Hardware owner said, you know what? I can't compete with that. But what I can do is I can own my mile. And he took his entire advertising budget and he said, I'm going to start sponsoring school dances, kids' sports teams. Maybe there's a community event that I can just be a part of and I can give my time. Maybe it's my dollars too. And he took that budget, he put it toward that. And he just solidified himself even further into the community. And that's what I'm talking about when you own your mile. By the way, if you are an online retailer, your mile might be the entire globe if you're selling globally. If you are regional, if you're national, but you get the idea. You want to own whatever it is, wherever your audience, wherever your customers are. All right, the next one is to deliver amazing follow-up. And this is a great tactic. I'll never forget buying electronics one day from a store that unfortunately it's been bought and bought again. I mean, they're very successful, and now it was finally bought by a large company who has a chain. But I remember the person sold me my TV set and the sound system that went with it, and I went home and I set it up, and a day later, I got a phone call from that person, and it's like, wow, they were just checking to make sure I was able to put everything together. Incredible. I remember buying my wife a car, and 2 days later, I wanted to surprise her. 2 days later, the owner of the dealership called me and said, how did your wife enjoy the birthday present? So he didn't just say, thanks for buying a car. He personalized it with this incredible follow-up. And it was just a phone call. By the way, a thank you note or a follow-up email, that's often sufficient. It's the follow-up that shows that you care. And the key is that it's personalized. All right, we're going to do one more, and that is community. Actually, I have the epilogue, so that'll be number 6. But the community is simple. And before I go any further, I'm seeing some great comments. Let's just address who they are. We've got Toby is on. Wow. From Wales. We've got from Norway, Siv. We've got people from all over the world. So thank you so much for all coming. We've got some great folks. We've got Patrick Finn from Fresno, California. Hello, Patrick. And so there's so many great people. Thank you all for joining us today. This is awesome. So let's talk about community. Do local well. I referenced this tied into owning the mile. Doing local well, and again, local is a metaphor for do your audience, do your customers well from the standpoint of give your customers what they want and what they need. In Ace Hardware, if I'm up in the state of Maine in the winter time, I'm going to probably be selling snow shovels. However, if I'm the Ace Hardware in Miami, Florida in the winter time, I might be selling, I don't know, sunblock is an accessory, but I'm not selling snow shovels. If I'm in the certain part of the area that might be ethnic, maybe there's it's more of a Hispanic population or the Cuban population down in Miami, I'm going to probably have items that are indigenous to that area versus if I'm in Wyoming and I'm in a rural area, I'm going to probably have more farm type items. Makes sense? So do local well. Know your customers well enough to give them what it is that they want. You can't be everything to everybody, and everything doesn't always suit everybody. The next idea is the law of reciprocity. And this is one of my favorites in the entire book. I know which one of these ideas are my favorite. And this is one of them. I believe in the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity is the idea that the more you give, the more you get. Now, you don't keep score. I love, there's a quote, and I don't know who said it, but when it comes to giving, forget. When it comes to receiving, that's when you remember. And I believe in that very strongly. If somebody gives to me, I'm never going to forget them. And when I do something nice for somebody else, it's because I just want to do something nice. And I don't need to remember. I don't need to keep score. Well, the law of reciprocity, ACE practices this. They are very, very involved in the Children's Miracle Network. So a percentage of the money that's brought in, they use for philanthropy, and their big area is Children's Miracle Network. And I thought, well, that's really cool. And what we find is that many companies, as well as individuals, small companies, solo entrepreneurs for that matter, they have a cause that they're passionate about, and oftentimes they'll share what that is. It could be a food bank. In today's world, it could be our healthcare workers that are on the front line. But the point is, there's a cause, and they give. And they give a little, they give a lot, it doesn't matter. They give. They're involved in giving to the community. And what's interesting is that it doesn't sound altruistic, but what happens is giving actually becomes a marketing strategy, because if you're recognized for giving to the community, people love to do business with people that are givers. So granted, that's a benefit of it, but at the same time, there's this really feel-good piece of it that, we feel really good about helping out an organization. So the law of reciprocity, practice it, because the more you give, the more people will come in and want to do business with you. So those are the 5. There is an epilogue to the book. And I actually, if somebody says, what's your favorite? Do I have the epilogue on here? Let me look. I don't have the epilogue. I'm going to go back. Well, we'll keep it here. We'll keep this slide here, because eventually I'm going to ask you to think about what we've talked about that you're going to use, that you want to share with your team when you go back, what you might change after hearing something I might have said today, or maybe there'll be a comment from someone. I want to tell you what the epilogue of the book is, and that is to create a demanding customer. This is an interesting concept. This isn't about creating a customer that whines and demands and expects more of you. No, this is about doing such a great job that if your customer left you to go somewhere else and demanded the same level of service that you gave them, that competitor would say, wow, you're being very demanding. And that's because you're that much better than everyone else. That's what the epilogue is about, is if you do all the things in the book, or even just a few of the things in this book, if you focus at the beginning, we talked about being better than average all of the time, where your customers are saying, they're always friendly, always knowledgeable, always helpful, always quick to get back to me. That word always followed by something positive. If that's happening, you're going to start to just have this relationship where the customer loves doing business with you. Epilogue, create a demanding customer. There it is in the lower third of our presentation today. So that kind of wraps up my formal presentation. Let's see if we've got any questions. I see my friend Jim Holmes, who I haven't seen or talked to in years, has joined us today. Hello, Jim. Great to see you. I don't know where Jim's living these days, but give me a call later on. I'd love to catch up with you. It'd be great to hear from you. All right. Who's got some questions out there? Let's bring them up. All right. Here's one. What change can I make right away to help make my company culture more customer focused? Great question. Wow. There's so many answers that I could give you, but I'm going to give you an answer that we talked about today already, and that is to tell the story. I mentioned this in other virtual book clubs that we've had over the last few weeks, but there's an exercise we have called the Moments of Magic card, and that is where everybody comes in to our weekly meeting. And if you do a daily meeting, you can take and kind of highlight a moment of magic from somebody every day if you wanted. And it's basically, tell me an example of when you created a great experience for your customer. And this is telling the story. We allow our people here to share their stories. And I encourage you to do the same. If every time you have a meeting, you assign somebody or ask everybody to bring their story from last week, what did you do that was nice for one of your customers, either internal customer or external customer, and share it, you start to hear these stories, and once in a while you're going to get one of those legendary stories like, wow, that's a great one. Let's make sure we remember that one, and we practice that all the time. So I would say tell the story is a quick, easy one to get involved. Very good. Let's see. We've got another one here from David. Hey, David from New York. Good to see you. I think, yeah, David from New York, but that background looks like you're on the ocean somewhere. Could I speak the difference about CX and customer service, customer experience and customer service? What's the difference? So I'm going to give you my basic belief. First of all, I believe both of them are philosophical. I've always said customer service is not a department. It's a philosophy to be embraced by everyone. I believe that customer experience is very closely linked to customer service because much of the experience is tied to service in some businesses. So I believe it's philosophical as well. But let's talk about really what the differences are. Some people look at customer service as this is what happens when the experience goes bad. I don't know if that's a great definition about service either. But here's the way I look at it. Service is every interaction that you have with your customer. It could be at any point, the beginning, a phone call. Hi, what are your store hours? How was that experience? Was it positive? Was the person friendly who answered the phone and gave you that information? That's part of the experience, but it's also really customer service, people interacting with people. If I have a problem and I make a call, and I talk to somebody, were they helpful? If I'm in the sales process, is this person paying attention to me? If they said they were going to follow up, did they follow up properly, timely with what they said they were going to do? All of this is part of service. And that's basically the mentality. I'm going to take care of my customer and do what do what they expect and do what I promised that I will do. Customer experience is all of that plus every other experience you're going to have with you. And I'll give you a great example. I go to the Apple store and I'm taken care of by somebody and they're really knowledgeable and they're really friendly and they sell me whatever it is I'm looking for. Let's say I'm buying another iPad and I walk out of the store with my iPad in a beautiful box, in a bag. I take it with me. By the way, even the bags are cool at Apple. I get home and I open up the bag. I take out the box and I open up the box for my iPad. I'm going, wow. Just opening the box is a cool experience. Look at how everything's laid out, how nice it is. And I pull it out and I turn it on and it welcomes me and it says, let's get set up. And it's like it's talking to me, even though it's not really talking. And I'm going, this is a great experience. Well, that's an experience. I had a great experience with the service at the store. Now I'm having a great experience with the whole concept of the product. If you're a retailer that mails something to somebody or anybody that mails something to someone and it's a package, how did you package it? When they open it up, are they going to see a bunch of pieces just laying loose in a box? Or are they nicely wrapped with bubble wrap or paper around them to keep them from getting damaged? I don't know if Jason's still with us from Volkswagen in Australia, but think about the dealership experience. When I walk into the dealership, how am I welcomed? Well, that's customer service. But what does the dealership look like? Is it well lit? do they have spotlights on the cars? Are they, what's that experience beyond the people-to-people interaction? So I know that's a little bit longer answer than you probably wanted, David, but that's it. You've got service to me is tied to people. And by the way, I can go off and I can expand on this quite a bit, but it's mostly tied to people. Experience is tied to virtually everything, including people. By the way, years ago, customer experience and customer service were pretty much the same. So today, when you look at a company that has a customer experience executive, a CXO, the Chief Experience Officer, oftentimes they're looking at ways to improve the process, to improve the experience through looking at data, through feedback, through looking at metrics. So it gets very technical in the customer experience side. But we could talk about this probably for another whole hour, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what's going on. All right, let's take a look at another question. Siv asks, what is the root cause of poor customer service, and what's the answer? Wow. Well, here, how do you eliminate the root cause of customer service? Well, this is a great question. I'm going to reflect back on my training experience. And by the way, Buddy Rice, who's with us on this in our book club today, he knows even better than I. We have an exercise that we do with our clients in a training environment where and by the way, you can do this the next time you meet with everybody. Ask everybody to think about the best experience they ever had and think about what made that experience great. And if you have 10 people in the room or more, what you're going to find is probably 70, 80% of people will say what made this experience great was that person who took care of me. In other words, it was the customer service. Well, go a little bit further. Well, they were so helpful. They were knowledgeable. I mean, these are adjectives to describe the person. And you'll find that it's very personality related, okay? If you then ask, let's look at the other side. What's the worst service experience you ever had? People will come up with some amazing stories. And when you drill down to it, it's like, well, the company didn't do what they said they were going to do. And okay, so the company didn't do it. It wasn't a building that did it. Tell me more. And they go, well, there was a person that I talked to that said that I was going to get this in the mail and I never got it. And then I called back and I had to talk to someone else. They said they were going to send it to me and they never did. So all of a sudden we're going, oh, wait a minute. People aren't doing what they say they're going to do. People are having, maybe some of them were a little bit, they had a bad attitude. They didn't care. They didn't seem to care. You'll find that a lot of these traits are what drives a bad customer experience. So you'll find not just the process makes a good or bad experience, but the traits of the people that are delivering on the process. That's where the real problem. You'll find 70 to 80% of the time it's people related. Well, with that in mind, well, there's your root cause. It's somebody that hasn't been properly trained. Maybe it was somebody that shouldn't be hired in the first place, but it's people related. So what's the answer to that? Well, number one, take a look at who you're hiring. Number two, train them well. Recognize them for when they're delivering great service. And if they're not, defend your culture by suggesting how they might do it better the next time. More training and coaching and mentoring. So that's just a fairly short answer to something that we will spend an entire day doing, which is training people on how to deliver an amazing service experience. All right, do we have another one? Can you talk about customer loyalty killers? Yes, that is in the book. Loyalty killers is part of the book. A loyalty killer is simply a phrase that just says, why am I doing business with these people? I can't stand it. One of my pet peeves is I hate when a company says, it's company policy. It's company policy. That's your policy? And maybe I think I'm right, and I think they're wrong, or maybe we're having an impasse, we're misunderstanding. But you know what my policy is? My policy is to do business with a company that doesn't stand behind company policy, because sometimes company policy needs to be a guideline more than just a hard, fast rule. Now, let me tell you where policy is important. We can't do this because it's illegal. We're not allowed to do it. We don't have the merchandise. I'm sorry, we can't do it, but maybe as an alternative, I can help you find it or give you an alternative idea, a suggestion where I can go to my competitor and help you there. But here's the point. If you can't do something, you can't do something. And it's the way you go about it. But a loyalty killer it's company policy. A loyalty killer is when you say no to the customer, an emphatic no. And you really shouldn't say no if you can avoid it. But what you can say is, you know what? There might be another way of doing this. When you say to the customer, you're wrong. And I have had companies actually say to me when I'm talking to somebody and I'm misunderstanding, I go, well, I'm just not getting this. They say, well, the way you're thinking is wrong. Wait a minute. Don't say I'm thinking wrong. The way you're explaining it obviously isn't clear enough for me to understand. Let's take it another level. But those are the kinds of things that put me off. In the book, I have one as an example. And it was a bad example. I went into a bank one day and I need something notarized. It was on a Thursday afternoon, just before a holiday weekend. And they said the person who does the notary, who actually has the stamp and can do that, they took an extra couple of days off and they won't be back till after the holiday weekend next Tuesday. And I think, well, I need this notarized today. So don't tell me somebody's not here who should be there. You should always have a backup plan. Those are the kinds of things that plant seeds in the back of your mind where you'll say, wow, do I really want to keep doing business with them? So those are loyalty killers. Let's see. It is getting close to, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left here. Let's take one more good question. Here you go. How do you train out an attitude that isn't service-minded? Marissa, that is a great question. So the first thing I'll do is say some people are not cut out to be on the front line. And they may be wonderful people, but they just don't get it. They don't understand it. It's just maybe they're very introverted and uncomfortable. And so if you put somebody who seems like they're pretty good, but in truth, they probably should be doing something else on the front line to take care of them, they may be good for a while until a certain point where the stress becomes too much. They implode. On the other hand, maybe they're better in the accounting function because that's what their background is, and they'd rather be back working on numbers and crunching numbers and helping and support the team that way. They don't have to be on the front line. So the point is, if they're not service-minded, there's a chance that you may not be able to turn that person around. That said, if part of their job, by the way, everybody's job, no matter what they're hired to do, if they're in the back room and seldom ever see a customer, their job is still to not only do the job they were hired to do, but to also take care of the customer if, in fact, they ever encounter a customer. So they have to have at least the common sense. It's very easy to expect that even a person that doesn't typically deal on the front line with the customer, if they encounter a customer, they should still smile. They should be friendly. You can teach somebody and coach somebody to that. It's just expecting that person to do it long term, hour after hour, day after day. That may be a little difficult to do. So I don't know if this is the answer you want, but I would say, number one, you hire the right person for the right job. They've got the skill behind them, and then you teach them what they need to do technically to deliver that level of service. I believe I used the example last week that there's a technical side of service and a basic customer service, make the customer take care of them kind of service. And I was talking about Jim Bush. Jim Bush was the senior vice president of worldwide customer service for American Express. And he said, if I have a choice between somebody that's really good at the call center work, they've had background with that, and they can, manage through the different screens. Or if I've got somebody that worked in a hotel for the last 10 years at the front desk, who should I hire? Well, I'm going to hire the person with the hospitality mentality, because that's the kind of person I want taking care of my customer. We can teach that person how to do the technical skills and to go through. You got the technical side of service and the practical side, the people side of service as well. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Do we have, I see Robert's got a comment up here. My team and I really enjoyed these last few weeks. Oh, thank you for all you do. You know what? Here's what we're going to do. I've gone through the books, and people are starting to go back to work. So we're not in the stay-at-home situation that we were over the last couple of months. So I'm still going to do this type of presentation. I'm just not going to do it every week. And I promise all of you who have been on these presentations, you know that you're probably part of my newsletter list, which is the Shepherd Letter. Every week, if you aren't, you should sign up for this. It's just a newsletter that It's a customer service idea every single week. I've done hundreds, I think about 650 of these articles over the last, 10, 15 years. I, for the last several years, include a cartoon every week. You are welcome to share these articles. You're welcome to copy the cartoon. Just make sure you give credit where credit is due and use it for your team, put it in your company publications, share it with everybody. I encourage you to do that. But I will announce when we're having another one of these types of virtual experiences. It may not be a book club. It may be just an idea that I have that I want to talk about. And if something happens that's newsworthy, I'll probably just jump on here and just do a live stream out to Facebook and YouTube, and we'll post it on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to see that and maybe jump in and share comments in those sites. So thank you all for being here. Thanks so much. It means so much that you would take the time out of your day to spend it with us. Thank you. And until we see each other again, you know how it goes. I want you to stay healthy. I want you to stay safe, but I also want you to always be amazing. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. And I look forward to the next time. Bye for now.